to another interview here with Purple Chorus. I'm delighted to say that today my very special guest is a lady I've been waiting to interview since the dawn of Purple Chorus. And today I'm finally able to say a very warm welcome to Dr. Julie Thompson-Dobkin, founder of Hidden Truths Project. So wonderful to see you, Julie.
Well, it's a pleasure to see you, Guy. And now I'm seeing you remotely as opposed to Paris, but it's a pleasure to see you again.
I know, yeah. The wonders of technology means regardless of where we are in the world, we can still sit and have a chat, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, I first got introduced to you and your work through Dr. Stephen Schachter,
Right.
Of Harvard, and his book Visions. And it was actually one of the Visions artists, Jude, is it pronounced Roslin or Ruslan?
Yes. Jude Roslin, yeah.
In Florida, who actually mentioned your name to me and kind of passed me along in that direction many moons ago now. And in fact, I think that'll be somewhere like around about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2012, one of our first exhibits, actually.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it probably will have been then, yeah. So I always tell people whenever I'm telling them what I do, etc., I always point them in the direction of Hidden Truths as well, or Hidden Truths Project, to give it its full name. Now, I'd like you to tell people what it is and how it came about. So please do.
I will. Thank you, Guy. So it's a kind of a long story, and I'll really try to be quick and summarize it. I'm a neurologist by training, but my training was not in epilepsy. And well after I was into my work, I was doing blood flow of the brain. At that time, my son at 9 years of age developed epilepsy. And unfortunately, I'm an adult neurologist, but we were sitting at the dining table and he got up from the dining table and he started wandering around the kitchen in the middle of the meal. And I'm like, what's going on here? Got up, went to talk to him, and I immediately put on my neurology hat. I said, something's not correct here.
Yeah.
I looked at him and he had some gaze deviation. His eyes were rhythmically moving. I immediately tried to do some cognitive testing. And he obviously was checked out. He was not connecting the dots by any means and was speaking in a nonsensical kind of verbiage. I immediately said, this is a seizure. I mean, it was just, it was pretty apparent at that moment that this was a seizure. And unfortunately, my mind was just shifting between being a neurologist and being a mother. And as a neurologist, I immediately thought, oh my gosh, what's going on? Does he have a brain tumor? Does he blah, blah, blah? And so my husband and I frantically took him to the emergency room. And it was scary because, you know, he immediately got an MR, he got a lumbar puncture, he got all these tests. And I was just incredibly fearful. So for the next 7 years, to summarize it up quickly, you know, I was wearing the mom hat and not the epileptologist hat. And so it was a constant uncertainty, keeping logs of abnormal behaviors and things like that. So I could become his advocate so that I could go to the epileptologist and I knew what kind of information they would need. And I would share this. So after 7 drugs, multiple side effects, everything from dizziness, tremor, weight loss, inability to communicate, we finally found this proper conglomeration of drugs which controlled his seizures. However, you know, until we were certain his seizures were under control, it was like, when's the next one going to strike? Every time I heard an ambulance, I would just, my heart would stop. But needless to say, once the seizures came under control, at that time, I was a novice artist. I was just fascinated by creativity in the brain and how it works. So I was
Mhm.
doing a lot of reading by Eric Kandel, Rudolf Arnheim, and visual thinking through the arts. And just in my own kind of research, studying the impact of creativity on the brain. As I'm
Mhm.
Google searching this, I come across the work of Dr. Schachter.
Mhm.
And I knew he was speaking on this topic in San Francisco. I was living in Southern California at the time. Flew up to San Francisco, the Pipeline Conference, to hear Dr. Schachter speak.
Mhm.
And it was based, like you said, on visions, artists living with epilepsy. And I was absolutely fascinated by the book.
Yeah.
When I introduced myself, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to combine my passions. I'm not an epileptologist, but if I can look at the art of epilepsy and use this as a platform to raise awareness and educate, that
Mhm.
was what I was going to do. I'm not an expert, like I said, in epilepsy, but I love art and I do
Mhm.
art. And it's really quite interesting. Steve has been just, I call him my mentor because every
Yeah.
step of the way he has been there, answers my questions, takes up a phone call, and really an inspiration and guides me a lot.
He is. I mean, he opened so many doors for me as well. I mean, I met him at the Congress in Prague. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, it was on the use of the arts, plural, as a means of non-verbal expression of experience of living with epilepsy.
Right.
And I highlighted at the Q&A that actually the use of music was very much underrepresented there, and so he invited me to fill in the missing gaps and come back to the conference the following year in Rome. And in the meantime, he just was so amiable and so helpful in opening so many doors. So I know for a fact, without the help of him and Dr. Peter Kaplan as well
Yeah.
at Johns Hopkins, that I wouldn't be having this conversation with you now. You know, he's an amazing man, absolutely amazing man. Yeah.
And, to be honest, most of the work that we've done has been in the visual arts. Having said that, though, we're 13, 14 years into this work, I've collected or amassed over 1,000 artists from all over the world living with the challenges of epilepsy. And in those mediums, they include everything. And yours was an inspiration, along with Cynthia Folio,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of capturing the seizure experience through music. And if you know anything about epilepsy, when you listen to your tracks on ictal variation, you
Mm-hmm.
can just, it encapsulates that emotional change in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had poets, we've had writers, we've had performance artists, sculptors, photographers. We've had just an incredible collection of art. And, it's interesting because in the beginning I thought, based on Steve's initial work, because now you figure that was a long time ago. I think the book came out in the mid 2000s, if I
Yeah.
recall.
Mm-hmm.
And so much has evolved in that arena. When I initially talked to Steve, my mindset was the art emanates from where the seizure location is in the brain, and so it reflects that. I quickly learned, however, that I classify the work that we do in 5 genres of art. These are novices, they just want to contribute to a larger cause for positive change. The second is some really encapsulate in their art the seizure experience, the
Yeah.
aura, the seizure, the post-ictal phenomena.
Yeah.
Um, some use technology. They've been in and out of hospital. They've had depth electrodes implanted in their brain. They've had epilepsy surgery and part of their brain is removed. So they take those experiences and they build that into the art, whether it be the technological aspects of it or that concept of what is the brain, what is the mind, what's going on when they plant these things in my brain. And then
Yeah.
there's some that, a lot of them, a fair number, it's the psychosocial issues, which is
Yeah.
huge. And that
Massive.
was really the instigating factor of why I began Hidden Truths Project. I had the fortune or misfortune that I was a neurologist. I knew the time constraints of approaching patients. You know, you have to treat the medical problem, move on to the next patient. Little time is afforded to, you know, really delve into life, well-being.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially if you have a child and they're transitioning. So, for
Yeah.
example, what I mean by that is, you know, he was 9. He had, you know, go camps where he had to go
Hmm.
away and stay with his friends. He had
Hmm.
friends and they didn't know what a seizure was. They had, you know, as he got into high school, you know, there's partying going on. And how do you tell
Yeah.
him, you know, be careful, not, don't
Yeah.
drink, don't do this,
Mm.
don't do that. And so, how could I raise my child to be independent but responsible at a very young age?
Hmm.
And I think we almost did too good of a job sometimes because
Mm.
we let them take chances that most
Mm.
moms would not let their children with epilepsy do. And I would do stupid things like take up paddleboarding in the winter to go on a paddleboard with him because
Hmm.
I was afraid he was going to fall off and have a seizure, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but he's extremely independent. But I
Hmm.
think it's a really important point for parents. And I see, and I think you've spoken with Ian Bone as well.
I've just the other week, yes.
Yeah. And sometimes parents can become part of the problem when you're dealing with psychosocial issues because we, in our minds, think about stigma. We
Mhm.
are fearful for our children because we want them to lead normal lives. And how do we be, are we too overprotective and we kind of accentuate that concept of stigma when maybe it's not really there, you know? And so we become stigma coaches, you might
Hmm.
say. And so I think
That's what Ian said, actually. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's a really fine road to navigate. Like, how much freedom do you give, but not being overprotective, but being protective enough. And it's a struggle. And I struggled with it a lot. Like when he'd go to
Mm.
college, you know, who's going to get his prescriptions? You know, what if he has a seizure and no one knows what it is? You know, are they going
Hmm.
to think he's an idiot? And to be honest, when he was a child, he was with a friend that knew he had epilepsy. They were riding their bikes, and it just so happened I was on the way to the pharmacy to get his medications, and I hear an ambulance, and my heart stopped. Every time I heard an ambulance, my
Yeah.
heart stopped. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I, my girlfriend called me, and it was her son that was with my son, and said, he just had a seizure. They're on this and this street. So I ran over there, and of course, the fire trucks are there, the paramedics are there. A guy's came out of the house and accused him of being on drugs. And I was so livid. I was just like, how dare you? He has
You know,
epilepsy.
that is still alive and well today. A few months back, I actually witnessed a young man having tonic-clonic seizures in the Paris transport network.
Yeah,
And the police arrived, and the first thing they said was, "Oh, he's on drugs."
yeah, right.
And I said, "Well, no." I said, "What he's having is an epileptic seizure, is a full-blown tonic-clonic seizure." And they were very skeptical, and they thought, "Oh, he's on drugs."
Yeah, right.
So,
It's the initial thing, right? It's drugs, or they're or you know, it's interesting because when he was younger, he was in this third grade, and it was a very independent school. And he was having episodes during the school day,
yeah.
multiple episodes.
Mhm.
And we'd have parent teacher conference. Why is he always like, he's just like not into school, whatever. And finally, when I made his diagnosis, I went back to the teacher and I said, tell me exactly what was going on. And he's like, she said, well, you know, it's a really stressful time in their lives when they're transitioning in independence. And kids do this all the time. They check out in the classroom. So he'd be positioning himself, looking at the wall when he was having a seizure.
Mhm.
And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just stress. He's checking out. And I'd
Mhm.
pick him up from school, and he was really felt sick to his stomach, severe headache because he had
Mhm.
postnatal migraine.
Yes. Yes.
And he would, sleep for 3 hours, he'd wake up and he'd be fine. And then when I said, how many of these episodes was he having? It could be 2 to 3, post-ictal phase for another half an hour to an hour when he was sick to his stomach. So you
Yeah.
figure he was missing probably 2 to 3 hours of educational time a day.
Wow.
And that explained why some of the grades went in a different
Yeah,
direction.
absolutely. I mean, I was somebody who didn't do very well at school either, but that's because um, my own epilepsy wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. So there's probably no coincidence there that my academic life didn't start really until after I was diagnosed, But the other thing that you mentioned that I thought 100% is about the time constraint between physician and patient. And one of the things I will always remember about Dr. Schachter when he was giving the talk in Prague, he said, you can quite often tell more about a patient's experience through what they don't say than what they do, as in filling in the gaps, filling the silence. And I just thought it really rang true with what you were saying there. The actual picture is in between what they tell you and what you hear. So.
Right. There was an interesting survey that came out. I don't remember the exact year. I think it was Candor Health and SK Life Science, perhaps. And they interviewed doctors and the patient and the families in epilepsy community.
Mm-hmm.
And what they showed is that, what doctors perceived and the patient's family said is the amount of time they spent discussing these various issues. And there was a disconnect, obviously. But the bottom line of the study was, too, that first, doctors aren't listening as much as they should. Second, people with epilepsy, whether they have uncontrolled seizures or not, just want to feel normal. They just want to be acknowledged for who they are. And I think that's what our work really focuses on, is giving people, their families, their caregivers a platform to tell their story. And I use storytelling a lot when I talk about our work, because I use art as a visual language, kind of metaphorically, that it can tell that inside out story. And Jude uses that term a lot.
She does, inside out. Yes.
But, if you think about it, that is true, because there's so many of those subconscious experiences that happens with epilepsy. And there aren't words that exist to describe those. I mean, human language is pretty limited, and it was developed to describe concepts which are more physical substrates, to make sense of it. But if a word doesn't exist, how do you tell that, But Jude has also made a really big point, and I think I've learned this along the way with Hidden Truths Project. I used to believe that because I knew what the artist was trying to tell me. So I'm like, oh, art speaks for itself, end of discussion. But no, I mean, because Jude's seizures are really, I think she has multifocal seizures. So depending where they are triggered in her brain, her art forms are totally different. What she visually represents, and hers are truly seizure-based art. And she said, if you look at, and I actually own this one picture, if you look at this and the average person would go into a museum and look at this piece, they think I was schizophrenic, that it was mind out of body, because she shows 3 images of herself. And when she's having that seizure, she becomes disconnected to her body, and she can see herself looking out, but she's inside herself. So that inside out story, I think, is a really important concept for seizure related art. Basically, so the picture, it's a very large image, and it's probably 2 feet by 4 feet. And it's 3 of ourselves, but each body image is kind of separated. And she gets this experience where she feels like she can, from inside, look at herself in multiple images. And so she said, a lot of times if someone would look at this in a museum, whatever, they might think I was schizophrenic, that I have this weird, psychiatric illness or something. And she said that's where you have to combine that with some context. And originally, when I started the project, I'm like, okay, we'll just show the art. But I quickly discovered that you have to put certain pieces of these art in context, because otherwise people will misinterpret. And I like to refer to a lot, and I as part of my research in neurobiology, creativity and things, it was like, how can we use an art form to become an educational platform? Now, whether that be music, whether it be photography, film, theater, performance, visual arts. And so the whole concept of what my goal was after I discovered that art just can't in isolation speak for himself. So I'd always capture the artist's statements. And the question presented to them was, has your epilepsy influenced your art? Or what are you trying to teach the person that's observing your art? So I always have the artist statement. We create artist booklets for each exhibit so people can read in greater depth. But on each label, we also put down the inspiration behind the art. And my whole concept was, how do I alter the perception of the observer of the art? And like I said, it could be music. So for example, if you played ictal variations to someone, they're like, wow, this is kind of a discordant. This is really powerful. They have no concept that that's reflecting the seizure experience. So I quickly discovered there has to be, even though words don't exist to necessarily describe what's visually being represented, that if you put it in context, it creates a better understanding. So we have to alter perception of the observer. Perception, if you think about it, you have brain, mind, you have physical substrate, and then you have the mind. And how do you define the mind? Is it the cognitive processes, which are, maybe it's some neurosynaptic connections, but it's kind of that enigma that we all kind of struggle with trying to explain. But having said that, I truly believe, based on my work and looking at the work of Rudolf Arnheim and some other people out of UCLA, Eric Kandel, that we can alter perception based on, we perceive the world based on our innate experiences. As a child, I grow into my adulthood, I've experienced this, and this. That forms my history, that forms my memory. So how can I go back into that brain and alter perception to create understanding and educate the public? So even though Hidden Truths was a platform for people with epilepsy, it was much more than that. We always use art, engage, empower, educate. And so we engage a person with epilepsy through being able to display their art, tell their story. It's a source of empowerment, reclaiming agency, identity. But then we can use that art to educate. So the whole concept of education, when I talk about it, is I have to teach, or I have to help the observer alter their perception to create understanding. So when people come to an exhibit, they know that this is called 1 in 26, the art of epilepsy. 1 in 26, because 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy in their lifetime or have a seizure. And so they know when they come that this is an art show based on people with epilepsy from across the world sharing various aspects of their epilepsy experience. So that right up front, they know that this is an exhibit on that. But I also feel like, because we play off different genres of art, I have to give them some context. Like, we have a beautiful piece of art by Gus Cummins out of England. And he took his digitized EEGs from prolonged hospital stays, compressed them, and created these masterpieces of art. And it was just his experience. And then he has some verbiage that I don't know if I can actually show it. Let me see if I can grab it and show it to you. If you can see this, but it's
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was able to combine his art from technology and create these masterpieces,
Mhm.
telling what it's like to be in a hospital with, electrodes placed on your brain and having seizures. And
Mhm.
in this image, for example, on this image, all the red dots are his seizures.
Wow.
The line in the center is the
Yeah.
body movements related to the seizures, and everything in the background is the digitized EEG. So that shows you the technological. We've had some, though, they address the psychosocial issues, isolation, loneliness, depression.
Mhm.
Um, and those can be really dark. And some people come in and they're like, whoa, I don't know if I really like this. It's putting me in a bad place. Well, you can imagine if you're living with seizures, I,
Yeah.
there is a dark place that people go
Mhm.
in the uncertainty.
I remember when I came to meet you in California, um, at the gallery, and I was looking around the gallery myself, and that was the first time I'd actually been to a epilepsy arts exhibition. And there was one of the pieces that really, really struck me was it was a puddle on a sidewalk, and there was a hand reaching out from under the water, and you could see kind of like the face of the person below the surface reaching up. And I just
Yeah.
thought, what an incredibly accurate
Yeah.
representation of the experience of living with epilepsy that is. I mean, I don't remember who the artist was, but what an incredible representation it was.
Yeah. Because I've worked with so many individuals from all over the world,
Yeah,
um, and so I've seen the whole spectrum. Like one that really struck me, and she was fairly new with her art form because she just developed epilepsy in her adult life. And it was related to a brain tumor, had brain surgery. And based on her prior occupation, which was in research and science, she had difficulty processing the work she did before.
yeah,
And so the first piece of art she did, which was in our, I think it was a 2015 exhibit when Joyce came in from Malaysia,
yeah.
was called Mentally Beat Up Black and Blue. And what she discovered was she developed this weird sensory thing that she was very much into textures after her
Right.
seizures. So she started felting. And
Okay.
she made this piece that was really quite disturbing, where half of the head was cut off and there was something coming out. And it was just her processing, this huge overnight transition in her life from being a
Mm-hmm.
researcher, brain tumor, epilepsy, not being able to go back to her prior job. And it was just absolutely brilliant. But most people would look at it and it's like, I don't like this. But that was important because it was an important teaching lesson, because art, even though we say it's an aesthetic experience, that could be positive or negative. It could be white or
Yeah.
black. It could be,
Mm.
and I think if you can elicit that uncomfortable feeling, that discomfort, you've done
Yeah.
your job.
That's exactly it. I mean, one of the doctors who first heard the first track of Ictal Variations, um, after about 15 seconds, got up and left the room.
Oh
And
man.
and I was talking to her afterwards, and she said it wasn't that out of disrespect. She said it's just the emotional trigger was so intense
Yeah.
from that music that I thought if I didn't get out of here, I was going to scream. And I thought, well, that shows me that I'm on exactly the right track, because
Right.
what I'm
Yeah.
conveying there is a really horrible experience. So if it sounds beautiful, I've completely missed the ball altogether. So, yeah,
You're misrepresenting it, right?
yeah, precisely.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the beauty of art. It's very emotive,
Mhm.
and if you can elicit emotions, positive,
Mhm.
negative, like I said, happiness, sadness, loneliness, isolation, depression,
Mhm.
then you've told your story,
Yeah.
and that's really important, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. And so out of Hidden Truths came is it Neuro Blueprint? Is that what it's called? Uh,
Yeah, it wasn't because of us, but I've actively engaged with them, the NeuroArts Blueprint program out of Hopkins, which is brilliant. And then, there's so much work going on in the neuro arts and neuroaesthetics right now. Some brilliant books have recently been published out of Hopkins in the NeuroArts Blueprint program. The one, Your Brain on Art. And then even Ian's book is a really brilliant book for people that might not get it, is Sacred Lies by Dr. Ian
Lives.
Wong, because it really reflects historically the role that the arts have played in epilepsy. And
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty devastating. And the
Mm-hmm.
problem is, even in contemporary times, we've come a long ways, and we've got the ADA Act in the United States, we've got all of this stuff, but stigma, discrimination, labeling still exists. And what I share with people is, and I did this in my presentation, and I had this in a conversation the other day, that if I come up to you and you don't know me, and you're trying to be very transparent, you say, yeah, I'm Julie, I have epilepsy, so if I have a seizure, this is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you say that word epilepsy, it's a label, it's a
Yeah,
medical diagnosis.
yeah,
And I work with a woman who does a lot of arts and health for cancer patients. And she said to me, and this I think is also true for the epilepsy population, she said when her clients tell someone they have cancer, the people are afraid because they don't know
yeah,
what to say. So what do? They do avoidance.
yeah,
Instead of saying, I don't know what to say, I'm here for you, just talk to me.
yeah.
They put a label on it and then they exit.
Mm-hmm.
And people just want to be seen and heard. You don't have to say anything, but listen, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
I mean, that really is the essence of the name of the organization, Hidden Truths, because
Right,
unless you tell the truth, with the case of epilepsy, people can't see it, and I think that is where the fear factor comes from. You know,
right,
if we were amputees, or had a broken leg and had a cast or something like that, then people could see that that is the ailment that we're living with or that we're discussing. But it's when it's something that they can't see, uh,
right,
where the fear factor comes across. But the media, as Ian and I discussed the other week, is also very, very guilty, because the media, in so many forms, obviously not in the case of the recent film that you and I have talked about before coming on air, but the media so often only portrays one type of seizure.
right,
So
exactly.
therefore, the global community only believe or only understand one kind of seizure. So all of the rest of them, the closing down, the not making verbal sense, the wandering round, and all the rest of it, they're not associated with the experience of epilepsy by the outside world. And
Right.
because the media never shows that, because it's not spectacular enough or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you saw the interview with my friend Sean, who's the actor who lives with
Yeah.
epilepsy, and that's what he said. He said if you show a more broader picture, then it doesn't capture the audience. Uh,
Right.
in the same way that so it's
Right. It's that's so true. And Hollywood sensationalizes things because that's what draws in the audience. But
yeah,
unfortunately, then it perpetuates that misunderstanding. I mean, obviously, tonic-clonic is a huge problem,
mm-hmm,
and it's very visible when it
yeah,
happens. But like I said earlier, most people just want to feel normal. And if they have a seizure, like if it's an absence, they might not pick up, a few seconds, boom, you're back to, but for example, in my son's case where it might only be 2 or 3 minutes, and it was, impaired focal awareness,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
focal motor with impaired awareness. Um, it was a post-ictal phase that
Yeah.
was so beat him up.
Yes.
The post-ictal was worse than the seizure
It
sometimes
is.
because
I've heard that said so many times
yeah,
before, because it's like the computer rebooting itself whilst you're
right,
trying to use it, essentially.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy because one of our artists out of Florida, he has a whole series of it's a body floating in a brain with the seizure starting, and it's the electric discharges kind of being disconnected, and he's just floating in this substrate with these electric shocks coming in
Mhm.
from all over. And he
Mhm.
calls it when the computer discharge, I can't remember the proper name of it, but something about the computer discharging. He has like the computer,
Yeah.
what do you call it, the board, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Screen.
and it's like going crazy,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing.
Circuit
Uh,
board. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh. I mean, I have to say, over the years, I've heard some great um, ways of describing seizure and describing the brain. I was at a conference in Paris a few years ago, and one doctor described the human brain as being like a shopping mall, because he said essentially it doesn't matter where in the world you go into a shopping mall, you will essentially find the same thing. You will
Oh,
find a place for men's clothes, for women's clothes, for jewelry, for sportswear, and a place to eat and drink. And that is true of pretty much any shopping mall anywhere on the planet. You know, it's just the location outside, or in our case, the exterior, that is different.
right.
And he said the best way to describe an epileptic seizure, he said, is like, he said, if you think right at this moment how many people are flying above your head right now, he said,
Mm-hmm.
millions. He said, but you don't know anything about it at all. Why? Because the journey is going perfectly smoothly, and those people are going directly from A to B. So therefore, nothing is disrupted. He said it just takes one delay or one diversion to cause a whole ripple effect.
Yeah.
And he said it's only then that people notice that there's anything happening whatsoever. And he said it's that ripple or that diversion or that delay which is symbolic of the electrical disruption in the brain, which manifests as seizure. And I thought that was just a brilliant way of describing it, really.
Right. It is. It's very good.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy.
yeah. So, how many years did you say Hidden Truths has been going now?
Well, the concept really was evolving in 2012. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think our first physical brick and mortar exhibit was 2013. And we expanded from just one site. Like originally, like I said, I was using reproductions of artwork from Steve's book. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of like, you know what, we need to do some original work. And through social
Yeah.
media,
Mm-hmm.
kind of collaborating with larger epilepsy organizations, we were able to recruit new artwork, but it quickly expanded to an international audience. So
Mm-hmm.
currently, we've had artists from every continent or 6 continents, including throughout Africa and Uganda, Zimbabwe, India, Jamaica, Canada, Sweden, Ireland, Malaysia. I mean, all over in every medium of art. And so in its beginnings, we were only doing California. We had an exhibit in Southern California. It quickly, though, as we started collaborating with some other organizations just to help spread the word, at our max, we had 7 exhibits. This was pre-pandemic. between Minneapolis, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Southern California, Washington, D.C., and a couple other. It's a ton of work because we are a small volunteer-based organization in existence now for, 12, well, a long time.
Yeah.
And
more than a decade. Yeah.
Yeah, more than a decade. And we've expanded. We discovered that first, to be sustainable, we'd have to start raising funds for ourselves. So we became a nonprofit. And we've also expanded our programming. So, for example, we started with just the national art exhibits. Then we expanded into what we call mindful-based art workshops, which would allow us to engage with a different population. Pre-pandemic, we were doing them in person in Southern California. Whether you like it or not, the pandemic became a catalyst for us because it forced us to go remote. And that opened up the world tremendously. So we could conduct these remote mindful-based art workshops on an international level. So we'd have participants from all over the world in that. It's not art therapy, and I want to be very clear about that because I'm not an art therapist. However,
I have the same issue when I tell people about what I do. They say, "Oh, music therapy," and I say, "No, it's not." It's
right. And I acknowledge the therapist, the art therapist. It's a huge training program.
Yeah.
And we engaged one for one of our workshops because when you were talking about what people see on the outside, we call it a mask project.
Yes.
And they're physical masks, and they get to paint the outside from several different perspectives, either how they want to be seen in the world or how they think the world sees them when they have epilepsy. And then you flip the mask over and it shows what's going on in inside your head, like the sadness, the loneliness, the seizure, disconnect, whatever. And then you discuss it. And I engaged an art therapist for one of ours, and I was so glad we did have her there because it can take people to a really dark place, and it's really important. And I'm not a therapist. And so I tell people it's not art therapy.
No.
So that's one of them. And then actually, we started a film series with Jim Abrams. He was our honoree from the Airplane movies, as you might know, and he's unfortunately died last year, I believe it was.
Yes.
And then Miles Levine, when he was just doing his trailer for Under the Lights, we featured Miles. And I've also worked with a couple of other documentarians that are doing some epilepsy-based work. And Ingrid Fa, who's a filmmaker with epilepsy, had some brilliant, so we called it If Not Us and Who film series. And then from that, we branched into what we call well-being forums. And I'll engage experts in the field or artists that use their platform for empowerment, and we'll have discussions and a panel discussion with Q&A afterwards. And then lastly, we developed an empowerment or arts and healing scholarship program. So any graduating senior or adult pursuing higher education, either in the arts, advocacy work, or healthcare work, they can apply for a scholarship. And we give them out annually. So it's gotten extremely busy. We're down to 3 art exhibits a year, but actually we did 2 pop-ups. So we really had about 5 art exhibits last year. But it's labor intensive. We just finished up our fall series. So our last show was in Southern California. We were in Chicago and Boston. Take kind of a month off to regroup, and then we start promoting for next year.
Start all over again. Yes. I'm sure it'll be absolutely brilliant, because if it wasn't brilliant, it wouldn't have lasted this long. A lot of people have great ideas that shine for a little while and then just vanish into the ether. But the fact that more than 12 years later, you're still here and still shining a light on the world of epilepsy through art is really a testament to the work that you're doing. So, and obviously, as you've mentioned quite a few names that who've been my guests. And I met Sandra Cruz through yourself as well, who wrote the musical about epilepsy because of the experience of a granddaughter. And obviously I met Ian through yourself as well, and Joyce, both of whom I've interviewed in the last couple of weeks. So it really has been a networker's delight, this organization for me. You know, it's been amazing. And I think it's wonderful that there is such an ability to actually connect, you know, rather than being two separate entities, to actually bring these things together, you know, is so brilliant and so advantageous to both sides, you know.
Yeah, you know, I always like to refer to it. I mean, art I always call it the universal language because,
It is.
yeah, and I'm sure you experience this as well. It doesn't matter if you're in India, Uganda, Ireland, United States. When you hear these stories and you see the artwork, they're one and the same. Doesn't matter what your culture, your race, your age, your gender, you know, your religious beliefs, they resonate, they come together, they build community. And I
Yeah.
consistently hear that from the artists and the artists' families and
Yeah.
caregivers. The
Mm-hmm.
beauty of attending the events are they have community. We
Yes.
come together, we acknowledge, we let their voices be heard, we listen, we learn. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such an empowering thing to know that someone actually looked at your artwork and they appreciated it. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they went away with some other different thing, but they learned from it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that building of community. And I think I always share this with my partner, Heidi, that, you know, this is really about community building. It's about, you know, building bridges and not being divisive because of that. It's about education. It's about empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And networking is critical. And I think that some of the times, you know, having worked with many different organizations, especially in the epilepsy space, you know, everybody is, it becomes a business when you have a nonprofit,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
and everybody's
David.
fighting for the same dollars, right? And so if you're,
David Clifford said that a little while ago. He said it becomes corporate, you know.
right, exactly. And when you're fighting for the same dollars, and it's not that we intended to be totally unique, but I think it's a unique organization.
Mm.
And like you said, the sustainability has spoken for itself and it continues to grow, because people relate to art. Art is
Mm-hmm.
that connector, you know,
Mm-hmm.
whether the music, the
Yeah.
visual, the performance, the film,
Mm.
the, you know, whatever. But people, it is a connecting force amongst various populations and historically to contemporary times.
Yeah, and I mean, I always say to people about the efficacy of music. Take Schindler's List, for example.
Yeah,
You know, has not a single word, but people can listen to that tune and
right.
feel exactly what the composer intended them to feel. You know,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, and Star Wars, Superman, E.T.,
Yeah.
all of those incredible instrumental pieces of music that don't have any words whatsoever, yet can say everything they need to say without the need for words. And in a world which has so many languages across so many continents, that
Right.
is where that universality becomes so incredibly precious. You know,
Right.
people might not understand a word you or I are saying, but they can look at the work that you present or listen to the music that I present and 100% understand everything we've just been talking about.
Yeah, it's funny because I think one of my favorite films with very little spoken words during a lot of it is a horror film, and it was done like I believe in the late 50s, and the the House on the Haunted Hill. I think it was 1956, and it's black and white. So first you're starting with a black and white film, which a lot of people don't get off on, but you put that music to it, or you put those sounds to it, and it is probably one of the most frightening movies I've ever seen. It's not blood and guts and gore, and
No.
it's just based on sound and black and white shadows, and it's an absolute brilliant film.
Yeah.
But it's all based on sound and black and white,
Yeah. I mean, my musical lineage was that my great grandfather was a successful brass band composer, conductor, and adjudicator from the north of England. But he actually started out as a pianist for the silent films.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I know certainly when I've looked at certain works that you've put out there, I will look at that work and I'll think, I know what that sounds like. You know, it's very cross. It's very multi-sensory.
You have, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, synesthesia is something that Michael Trimble in London is investigating right now.
Oh wow.
Is synesthesia in temporal lobe epilepsy.
Oh wow!
And that is going to be an absolutely fascinating study, because art is so synesthesic, and I'm aware that for some people, certainly with reflex epilepsies, it's actually sensory triggers.
Wow.
So for some people, it might be something that they smell that will trigger a seizure. In musicogenic epilepsy, it's a piece of music or a sound that they hear that will trigger a seizure, because it's the emotional reaction, and it's just so incredible how powerful our senses can be, and how multi-sensory experiences can be.
Yeah, I mean, you probably have read about. I think you mentioned this probably in one of your articles, the Mozart effect.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's been some debate on that, but yet in that small population, they've shown synchronization of waveforms in the brain based on, I can't remember, it was piano concerto.
Yes,
I want to
442,
say,
K442.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that ties in with the work of Dr. Trimble and Dr. Nigel Osborne as well now, with X systems, which is actually taking the patient's brainwave activity and aligning it with 8 hours of music from all different genres from all over the world, and bringing the patient back in for an overnight EEG. And whilst they're asleep, they are listening to 8 hours of music, which aligns to their healthy brainwave activity. So therefore, the brain and the waveform align with each other. And it's been proven to have positive effect, not only on epilepsy patients, but in patients with post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And it's a real game changer, because that is a non-invasive, non-surgical, positive way of treating and reducing the severity and frequency of seizure activity. So, I mean, I will always and forever fly the flag and wave the flag as hard as humanly possible for work such as that. I mean, it's just astonishing, really. So on a personal level, you mentioned that you're an artist, and you have your own experience of living with epilepsy as a mom. Has your experience of living with epilepsy ever inspired your own art?
It's actually, most of my art is on that basis. I mean, prior to starting the nonprofit, I was doing mannequin art, for example, but it was always on social justice issues. So I did a series of mannequins on women's rights, women's voices being suppressed. I did another piece on war and killing. As a pacifist, I just couldn't process what was going on. I did another piece on death and dying, as I lost my father to cancer and had to kind of navigate the emotional things that was going on. So this was a piece on death and dying. And then I decided I wanted to address these weird phenomena and things that went on with epilepsy. So then I started reducing from mannequins to smaller structures. You know, everything from, it's assemblage. So I use bowling pins, I use recycled everything. And one of my artists out of Vermont supplies me from flea markets. So I've created a lot of weird shadow boxes about the disconnect of epilepsy, sometimes based on communication, sometimes based on side effects from medications. I built a structure out of labels from pill bottles with side effects profiles, and then I put old pills all over it. And
that sounds absolutely brilliant, to be honest with
you. And a lot of stuff with numbers, because I've had people share that some of their auras are like their mind keeps like putting numbers throughout their brain. So I do a lot of stuff with numbers and circles. And the other thing is puzzles. I do deconstructed puzzle pieces because for two reasons. One is, as a neurologist, I approach a patient. I'm a central nervous system neurologist, not peripheral. And I feel like when I interview a patient, so most of my time is spent in an interview of a patient, because if I listen to that patient, I can usually come with a working diagnosis. I'm putting these pieces of the puzzle together to complete the puzzle. So I can go away from that interview with a diagnosis, and then getting the scans or blood works are just icing on the cake to confirm that diagnosis. And I feel like in epilepsy too, it's a puzzle and we don't understand it totally, but we constantly put these pieces together and we try to create a complete picture. So I do a lot of work with puzzles, and I'm a puzzle fanatic. I love doing puzzles.
And of course, you'll know yourself that puzzles can actually be in themselves a trigger because of the excitability caused by overconcentration. And you'll also most likely be aware of the piece called Puzzled by Dr. Jim Chambliss.
Yes.
Which, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Jim Chambliss actually has acquired epilepsy in adulthood following a road accident. And his way of coming to terms with that new reality was that he took the model of the Rubik's Cube and he actually created a different painting on all 54 squares. And that is actually in Stephen Schachter's book, Visions. And Dr. Chambliss was actually at that conference. And just before I wrap up, I'm absolutely certain that there's going to be a part 2 to this interview. I think we could go on for hours and hours. So I think there's definitely a to be continued to this one. I presented a poster in Rome the following year, and Jim Chambliss was there, Dr. Jim Chambliss, and he actually corrected me on something. And he said, it's not epileptic art or epileptic artists. He said, because by using the word epileptic in that context, you are putting the condition before the person.
Right.
So he said, for example, he said it's actually incorrect to say that a person is epileptic. He said the person isn't. He said the seizure is, but not the person. And that is a whole other conversation that many, many people have had over the years, is that do they identify as condition first, person second, or person first, condition second? And that largely depends on environmental history. And one of the best people of explaining that type of frame is Dr. Robert Sapolsky from Stanford. He's a human behavioral scientist and just a brilliant person to listen to. He's kind of on a level with Stephen Schachter, really. He's one of those people I could just watch and listen to for hours on end, you know. But yeah, as I say, I'm absolutely certain that there is going to be an interview with Dr. Julie Thompson-Dobkin part 2, because I don't think we could possibly fit everything in to this meeting. But I have to say part 1 has been absolutely delightful, and I'm very much looking forward to when I can say for a second time my guest today is the amazing Dr. Julie Thompson-Dobkin. So for now, thank you very, very much, and I will see you very soon.
Well, thank you, Guy. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you again remotely and just to chat. I really appreciate it. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Goodbye.